So now our next speaker will be Paul Gabla from Alcatel Submarine Networks. And Paul, the floor is yours. How from Alcatel's perspective, what do you see, how do you see the cable infrastructure developing in and around Europe, please?
Yeah, thanks a lot. So listening to the variety of speakers here, a lot of them have actually raised a couple of the points that I was about to mention. But anyway, I'm looking at it from a slightly different angle, from a global market perspective, and what are the technologies and key challenges to enable all this infrastructure to develop in a healthy way. So first slide is a very high-level summary of what are the trends in our industry in the last coming years and upcoming few years. So first thing, everybody on the call here knows that, but it's useful sometimes to remind it to other people, is that the global infrastructure is really highly relying and highly dependent on submarine cables, not so much on satellite, which are mostly used for access, but for really the big highways that we're talking about, there is no alternative today. So, and the very interesting evolution over the last couple of years is that we have moved to a fully digital world where what is actually fueling the traffic consumption is really new applications, cloud computing, and in the future, probably virtual reality, augmented reality, etc., plus the development of 5G, which will provide very enhanced bandwidth abilities for the consumers to access the network, and therefore there will be a corresponding increase of international traffic usage. So that's what we have seen in the last couple of years, and I think everybody in the industry and operators, service providers, etc., they are gearing up for that increased request on bandwidth. And that's why we have seen the global market for submarine networks almost double in size between, say, 3-4 years ago to what we expect it to be in 3-4 years from now. And actually, 2020 was a very significantly high year, as you'll see just after. Another paradigm shift that we have seen in our industry, looking at it from a supplier/customer perspective, is that before our customers were mainly companies building networks to do business with it in terms of selling and wholesaling capacity. Today, it's slightly different because some of our customers, and actually some of the bigger customers today, are really building networks for their own use, mostly, not entirely, but mostly. And I would say that probably the business case of building cost versus wholesaling is maybe not as prominent as it used to be, at least for at least half of the market. If we look at the growth of the market that I was describing just before, so this is a high-level view, at least that's ASN's view of what the overall construction market is today for telecom systems. So as I said, moving from 2 billion 4 years ago to about 4 billion in 4 years from now, or in 3 years from now. And in the middle, in 2020, which was last year, there has been a big surge. That was a very big year in terms of orders. And for ASN in particular, the 2 Africa contract in itself was a big piece of work. And we are actually in the middle of building that. I'll talk later about the sustainability of that growth, but let's first spend just a little bit of time of the specifics of the industry. So what is important for customers, in our view, is that they have a dependability of a supplier that can assume the responsibility from day one from even before day one up to the point where the network is in service, and maybe even for during the whole life of the system, depending on how support and maintenance is supposed to be provided. So at ASN, we are involved in all the steps that are involved from route planning, which is really an office activity, all the way to what is done beforehand permitting activity, designing the system, manufacturing, installing, commissioning, and later on maintaining the system. So I believe from a quality perspective, it's important for customers to have, let's say, a sort of a one-stop shop that guarantees a level of performance and dependability of the network over its lifetime. So this is just a high-level view of what building a submarine systems entails. So some PCs are on land, some PCs are under-sea. You have heard in some of the presentations before that connectivity to the terrestrial network, of course, is of paramount importance. So we are well-versed into that because, as you know, SN is part of the Nokia group, and we believe we are able to offer the end-to-end solution that is able to cater with most of the needs. Just as a side comment, at the bottom right, I put a typical breakdown of the construction costs for a submarine network. So in green is really the submerged plant, cable and repeaters. In blue is the marine operations, survey and installation. And then the rest is everything that goes around building terminal equipment and then testing the network, project managing the manufacturing/installation project. But so roughly you have three blocks of 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, just to make it simple. Of course, depending on the specifics of each project, it may be slightly different, but the order of magnitude is probably there. Okay, so just a little bit of historic perspective on the capacity of systems and the corresponding affordability of capacity. So I've just taken two sample points, one 20 years ago and one basically now. The cost of a transatlantic system, I've taken a sort of middle view, so probably the one of 2000 was about 2 to 3 fiber pairs. The one of 2020, the cost I put here is probably for 6 to 8 fiber pair system. Of course, systems these days have many more fiber pairs and they could be more expensive. But for something similar, and the same holds for the Pacific, you've seen the construction cost over 20 years basically been dividing by 2. And over the same period, capacity was multiplied by more than 1,000. So that means that there is a drastically reduced cost per bit for submarine systems, which of course benefits everybody, the industry at large, but moreover, all the end users and consumers who have access to capacity at levels and prices never seen before. So here is the underlying technology that has allowed to do that. So of course you have the progress of electronics, where the line cards have gone up from 2.5 gig to 10 gig, 100 gig, etc. And we'll have 1 terabit line cards in the near future. Then the WDM has progressed quite a bit, because I remember that 25 years ago we were talking about a handful of channels. Now we're talking about 150 to 200 channels per fiber. And then the number of fiber pairs, which has gone up from 2 to right now the state-of-the-art of systems to be built, not installed yet, but to be built, is 24 fiber pairs, and I'm confident it will continue to grow in the near future. And that is a way to get away from the Shannon limit that I remember was mentioned by one of the speakers, which defines the maximum capacity you can cram through one fiber. So then multiplying the number of fiber pairs, of course, allows to increase the capacity of the overall cable. So we are looking at cables which were state-of-the-art just a couple of years ago at 160 terabit per cable, and now we are talking about more than 500. And when we are looking in the not too distant horizon now to a petabit cable being available in a couple of years from now. So I think that's really it's an amazing evolution. And that is what is requested by customers to serve the ever-growing need for or hunger for capacity in all aspects of the network. So the underlying technologies beyond capacity, there are a number of other things that are important. So capacity of the highway is important, but then networking flexibility is equally important. Being able to reconfigure the network, to put in place complicated network topologies, and then to interconnect all the assets and manage them in a unified way, etc. So all that is really important for our customers, and that's a need that is being emphasized more and more by all our global customers. Then, of course, beyond the technical capability, you need industrial capability as well to be able to provide the level of construction capacity that is required by the market these days, which is quite more than before. Because if you remember one of the first slides I showed, so the market's basically double in size. So given that prices are more or less stable or actually going down a bit, it means that we have to build more and more kilometers of cable, more and more optical amplifiers, have more and more cable chips to install all that, etc. So if I try to summarize, so reliability is a key component of submarine networks because they are meant to operate for 25 years. So you need dependable construction and a dependable partner to be able to sustain the system for its whole lifetime. At the same time, innovation is constantly required, both in the means of implementing network, but also in the basic technologies, the couple of things that I discussed just before. So looking at a high-level view of what are the challenges as we see them today. So the first one, really, of course, is to keep up with the technical race, because developing more and more capable systems, well, it involves a lot of investment in R&D, and therefore there needs to be some time to actually be able to exploit the new technologies that are being built before jumping on to the next one. So that's a bit of a difficult balance to find, investing in new stuff and then being able to sell it a couple of, well, let's say, hopefully a couple of years, and maybe sometimes a bit less than that. But anyway, so that's one challenge that we have as in the supplier community. Another challenge that we are facing is the market growth that I was showing on one of the first slides. Is it sustainable? Because all of the people with gray hair in this industry, they all know that this industry has always been cyclical, with cycles of typically 5 to 6 to 7 years, which were due to, I would say, a lot of investment and then trying to just exploit that investment and then move on to the next wave when a new, more capable technology comes along. Now it looks like we are more in a continuum, meaning that the growth seems to be more steady, although I don't have a crystal ball, so I'm not sure that it will remain forever the case. At the moment, that's the bet that I think the industry is taking. We are assuming that it's going to be sustained, and based on the discussions with our major customers, they see their needs growing for the foreseeable future. And the speakers before me have more or less all of them have evoked that this perspective of growing needs. So as a result, the supplier industry, ASN of course, but I think all our other partners and competitors are doing the same. We are gearing up to be able to answer the challenge. And I think Norman just before mentioned the need for available capacity, and that's what we are doing. We're investing in our factories, cable repeaters, and we're also investing in new marine resources. So let's say that we are all together in the same boat there. So we invest, and we hope the market will be there to be able to use that capacity that we're building. And then there is another aspect that is growing in importance in the last couple of years, and most surely in the next couple of years, is the awareness and implementing means and the capabilities related to a more green industry and to a climate change measurements. So Norman, for example, and Ori, they mentioned that for the Medusa and Cammering systems, that climate change capability will be important. And we have been working on that for a couple of years now. So we are currently working, and I know our colleagues in the supplier community are doing the same. So we believe that, let's say, within 2, 3, 4 years from now, these capabilities will be an integral part of future systems in the foreseeable future now. So it's no longer a long-term thing. I think it's the mid or maybe even short-term thing. So that was the quick overview I wanted to do, Thomas, on the challenge that we see from the supplier end of the side of things.
So thank you very, very much, first of all. So really, actually, in a way that brings together quite a few elements that we've been hearing today, in terms of growth, in terms of a green, there's like a green element there and kind of smart infrastructure element there, and I really, hope, probably on behalf of for sustainability of the industry, I hope this now is not like a boom and bust situation, but actually we are on a sustainable path, and that's the thing from you as a.
That is the challenge, and that's the I think if the industry globally is smart enough, it will be a healthy world for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. No, but one question, and you mentioned somewhere about that people are building networks for themselves and not necessarily for other people. So do you, in terms of diversity of your clients now, do you see that changing? Do you see that your clients are much more diverse than what it used to be before? And how that impacts also your business, and how do you see that in the future?
Yes. So in fact, the obvious change in the last let's say 5 years is the growth in volume of the investment of two of the speakers that we had here before me. So Google and Facebook, namely, have been investing more and more heavily in networks, and I think the change they have implemented over the last 5 years is that they moved from buying capacity to somebody else to building their own networks. So it doesn't mean that the networks are exclusively for their own use, but they build the network to their own specs, and then they try to find partners to co-invest with them. So that's the model that we have seen on Equiano. That's not very openly yet, but it will be like that at the end of the day, probably. Unless Sylvie wants to contradict me, but I think that's the aim at the end. Onto Africa, it's more obvious in the sense that it's a partnership from day one. But anyway, nevertheless, these two big companies are the main drivers for these big systems. So for us, for the industry at large, it's a big change. While there were other players in the past that had similar roles, but that's like more than 15 or 20 years ago. The carriers now are looking at it in a slightly different way because they have a business case to put together to their boards, meaning the network is going to cost that much. I'm going to get this much revenues by wholesaling capacity to somebody else. For the OTTs, I would say probably that business case part of the equation is less prominent because the cost of infrastructure is really a cost. It's not so much the element of a profitability business case. At least that's the perception we have. And so that's why I was saying in the beginning that they build the network primarily for their own use before thinking about reselling it. So I think it's a change in the market dynamics in a way.
So just on this one, just to add on this, and because it was mentioned today, this question about that submarine cable industry might have or might go similar transition like telecoms and towerco industry. So now what we're seeing there is, you say, the customers and kind of users are building this for themselves. And to the extent you kind of can see the future, do you think this will continue, or do you think is again part of the cycle where people build for themselves and then, kind of industry layers up again? And
well, I was just talking about the most obvious or the biggest component of the market. However, the other component that you're describing has always been there and is still there. So, for example, what Philip presented a while ago, the aligning project, that's exactly that. So they are building, but not for aligning themselves. They are building, of course, for end users. What Norman is talking about is the same thing. So both models are coexisting, but at the moment, let's say the market volume drivers are really the main ones that I was mentioning.
Okay, thank you. We also have a question in the audience, so I think if we can give the microphone. Sorry, I understand there is a microphone existing somewhere. So, is there a way to ask? Sorry, just 1 minute.
No problem.
Just like you will. Paul.
Hello, good afternoon. One question. Thinking in the day after the RFS, what is the Alcatel view in terms of marine maintenance, namely the cost? With all these projects and a huge number of kilometers to install, your cable ships are more focused in installation than in maintenance, and there is a consequence in the future in terms of cost in your private agreement you offer to the customers to maintain the cables. What is your view in this point? Very
Okay,
important.
so that's an
Very
interesting
important
question.
because it's a very important percentage of the O&M costs during the life of the system.
Absolutely. It's a good question because indeed the marine maintenance market has been organized traditionally around regional zones. So each cable owner has to subscribe to a particular maintenance agreement. And a couple of years ago, there has been offered to the customer community some diversity because in some areas they have two alternatives to contract from. And the challenge that is coming up, I think, is given the very large numbers of networks that are being built, there will be a large number of systems to be maintained, and maybe there will be issues of priorities, which ones gets repaired before which, and so on. So indeed, there is need for a more organized community of maintenance providers, probably. And there are ongoing discussions on how to make this more efficient. But in terms of the resources, you hinted to the fact that cable ships are more focused on installation than maintenance, and that it's not the fact actually. So there is a need for a lot of cable ships to install the new systems, indeed. But the maintenance cable ship fleet, the worldwide maintenance cable ship fleet, is actually increasing as well. So I don't think there is a shortage of maintenance ships, to the contrary. So I don't think there will be an issue in that respect. But having said that, you mentioned rightly so that the cost of O&M marine maintenance is a big component of that, and there may be ways to think about doing that more cost efficiently, and there are ongoing discussions between a marine maintenance provider and some of the customers to try to imagine possibly different models. But these discussions are still at very developmental stages, so not much to say conclusively yet.
All right, thank you. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.